Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à chacune et à chacun.
Thank you. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. We have just concluded a European Council. We had quite a lengthy night along with Ursula. We wanted to communicate on the agreement that we've reached on energy. It's a very important agreement indeed, with an immediate effect, as you may have noted. Over recent hours, there's been a significant price reduction. So we are acting in concert, acting as Europeans and mobilizing together and this is initiated by the European Council with the European Commission to take the necessary steps to ensure that we are credible, strong, and we protect our European citizens. We had two topics this morning, very important topics on the agenda: a strategic discussion and debate on our relations with China. We also took on board other foreign affairs matters too. And once again, of course, we touched upon how we will continue to act in support of Ukraine and implement the tools that we have at our disposal to put pressure on Russia. Now, a few elements just to summarize this discussion. It took more than 3 hours. The aim is not to come up with written conclusions, but truly to discuss strategy to prepare the next major meeting, and that will be with the ASEAN countries here in Brussels in December. First element, we have taken stock of the fact that the Chinese political system does not operate along the same rules as we do. We consider that we are a democracy, and that is a very pivotal issue. We have human rights, personal rights, freedoms, whereas in China, the point of departure is that the state and indeed the party is the determining criterion. So you are operating with a very different matrix, a very different political system. This is an objective, neutral way of ascertaining the facts. We have looked at our various levers, though. We have to be strong and upright and defend the principles that we believe in strongly: fundamental rights and fundamental freedoms. We are committed to introducing more reciprocity in our economic relations with China and Europe. This is work that will have to be done across the board in all topics, and it's closely connected to engaging with China on other subjects, climate change, which is a very obvious topic. We want to engage with China. So this discussion showed a very clear will to avoid being naive, but neither did we want to embark in systematic confrontation. We have our own model to develop, to build, to model and form our relations with China. We have to ensure that we can respond to the way that our programme is organised, and has been some time now. There's great consensus and convergence amongst the European leaders on the importance of truly developing strategic autonomy, the capacity to be less dependent in strategic terms, to increase our independence in strategic terms, but also as part of that to reinforce and diversify our partnerships with the rest of the world. We had a summit in February in Brussels with African countries and partners, which was an opportunity to build the foundations for a new relationship, a new mutual relationship, partner to partner across Africa. We wanted to ensure that we, the leaders, can deliver on our promises. We don't want to bring about any disillusionment. There are expectations, so we have to assess the promises we make, how they're implemented and how they're being brought about. This is a very strong tool, and it's something that needs regular and political assessment to ensure that the objectives that we've set ourselves are met and that our partners do gain added value from their relations with the European Union. Latin America, I'm sure you will be aware, next year under the Spanish presidency there'll be a summit in Brussels with Latin American countries, and we are preparing this summit. There's also the Indo-Pacific region, and ASEAN will have the meeting here in Brussels in December. We need to engage with the rest of the world, diversify our partnerships, build strategies to ensure that we are more independent. And then this is a link to a very dense debate discussion that we had in a few hours. It reflects what we discussed in March in Versailles. This was on the strategies of the European Union. We considered there were three key pillars that we had to work on in order to reinforce our capacity to influence, to defend our interests and promote our values. The first pillar is energy. We've said an awful lot about that recently, so we continue to be extremely committed to building our autonomy and sovereignty in this area, because when we are very dependent, there are costs, there is a price, and there are difficulties in energy dependency. So we are trying to deal with that issue. The second element, security and defence. This is a key moment to reinforce European defence, increase cooperation amongst ourselves to decrease dependence there. And this is in very close cooperation with NATO, and we are actively working on declarations on the part of NATO and the EU. And then technological leadership. We want to look at technologies for the future too. There are stakes that are also touched upon by the previous topics. We have strengths, we have weaknesses, and we have to ensure that in terms of technological dependence, we have the CHIPS Act and other acts which seek to mobilize the resources that we have at our disposal, and we have to encourage innovation, technological development, and be ambitious in this area. These are a few elements, a few of the lines of thought that show the very density of discussions and the fact that it was all directly linked to very topical current issues. We are in a phase of geopolitical transition, and it's important that in Europe we have clear ideas, that we act in concert, and that is perhaps the best summary of the very spirit of our discussions at this UCO and Foreign Affairs. And then on to Iran. We have a reference to this in the conclusions. It illustrates our values, protection of women. This is very clear. Sanctions have been taken against those who are participating in the repression of peaceful demonstrations. And this is, of course, linked to their support of Russia against Ukraine. So again, there were in-depth discussions there. We looked at the situation in Ukraine and interventions. We had a virtual intervention from President Zelensky, and we have looked at our support for Ukraine. There's a lot of support for it, military, financial, humanitarian and political, and we have to put pressure against the offending regime, and we also have to look at the freezing of assets that have been seized and their use for reconstruction and support of Ukraine. There will be a conference there. The Commission and the World Food Programme are involved in this, so the international community is involved in coordination, very strong coordination in the short term to preserve Ukraine, and we have to bear in mind this major act a few weeks ago where we granted Ukraine candidate status, which is something that is very important. So we also need to act to ensure that this is a credible and strong perspective for Ukraine. So we've been working on this very directly. So it was a very fruitful UCO. They worked within a reasonable time frame on very difficult subjects, and this has certainly demonstrated that we have this conviction that when we meet together, we can increase our influence and have genuine constructive impact. And it's not done yet. We have work to do, and this lies ahead of us, and this summit should give us confidence for the work that we have to do in the months to come. Thank you.